Welcome to a place where family secrets don't hide in the dark. They explode in the sunlight. Here, quiet hallways turn into battlegrounds, and one overheard whisper can unravel a $3.1M empire overnight. This channel dives into the kind of stories where floral contracts expose secret alliances, guest lists reveal hidden motives, and the arrival of 300 uninvited guests transforms love into betrayal. You'll hear tales where a husband's charm shatters under pressure, revealing secret deals, private messages, and manipulations too twisted to ignore. Moments where chaos rips through the vineyard like wildfire, dragging long, buried resentments into the open. And confrontations so sharp, so precise, they carve unforgettable revenge into the memory of every witness. If you're ready for raw emotions, shocking truths, and family drama that hits like a storm, you're in the right place. Welcome to the story they never wanted you to hear. A quiet breath in the hallway used to feel like peace, but that day it carried something else, tones too soft to be innocent, words too sharp to ignore. Whispered voices drifted from behind the half-closed door, threading together a plan that didn't belong to the people speaking it. The names of caterers, decorators, musicians, and florists floated through the air like thieves tiptoeing across broken trust. And then the final blow, the mention of a $3.1M Vineyard, spoken as casually as if the deed were resting in someone else's pocket. The world didn't tilt, it split. Each quiet syllable painted a picture of an entire wedding, secretly arranged behind the owner's back, planned down to the last detail without a single invitation, request, or ounce of respect. It wasn't just the betrayal of family using something sacred as a backdrop for their celebration. The real fracture came from the familiar voice joining them, steady and confident, too confident, guiding the conversation like a seasoned puppeteer. The husband's voice, smooth, controlled, almost proud. The sound of him assuring everyone that everything would be handled, drilled deeper than any lie ever told. There was a tone that didn't fit the man known at home. This version had rehearsed deceit in his throat for a long time. Each promise he made to them carried a double edge, slicing through any illusion left of loyalty or love. There was talk of how he'd take care of the owner, as if manipulating the person who shared his home was nothing more than a business tactic. He even explained how the vineyard staff could be redirected, how schedules could be shifted, how the event could be executed without a hitch. Not once did anyone question his authority. Not once did he hesitate while claiming control over something he had no right to offer. The realization hit harder than any argument, confession, or previous fight. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was a practiced betrayal, a partnership he had built with them in shadows, far away from the light of honesty. Every whisper revealed an unsettling truth. His loyalty had never lived in the home he pretended to cherish. It stayed with the people who applauded his manipulation, standing there, listening to a husband play both sides with disturbing ease. Something inside settled into silence. Not the silence of weakness, but the kind that steadies a hand before delivering a blow that will never be forgotten. That hallway became the place where love died and clarity rose from its ashes. Not a single word was spoken aloud. Not a gasp, not a tremble, just a quiet shift, the kind that comes when a person realizes the betrayal didn't start that day, it only became visible. The moment ended with one truth echoing through the chest, sharp and cold enough to carve a new path forward. Nothing would be the same again. Every detail leaked out slowly, like water slipping through cupped hands. Small enough to dismiss at first, but impossible to ignore once the full weight settled. What began as overheard whispers grew into a trail of evidence, left carelessly across emails, text threads, and printed contracts tucked between papers never meant to be seen. Floral arrangements were chosen in shades that had nothing to do with the vineyard's usual palette. Their invoices addressed to people who had no ownership, no authority, yet somehow carried the confidence of rightful decision makers. Guest lists were arranged with names highlighted, crossed out, rewritten, and reshuffled, each change revealing who mattered to them and who didn't. The planning wasn't just thorough, it was intimate. Too intimate, Family members didn't simply assume permission. They acted as though it already existed. Conversations between them sounded rehearsed, practiced, built on a foundation of lies woven so tightly that unraveling one thread exposed an entire web of deceit hiding underneath. They weren't just taking advantage, they were strategizing around manipulation crafted with precision. And at the center of it all was the husband, his fingerprints on every detail, every negotiation, every whispered promise. His charm had always carried a certain polish, but never had it gleamed with this kind of calculation. A secret version of him lived inside those messages. A man who spoke in coded phrases and casual assurances, telling others exactly what they wanted to hear while preparing to twist the truth in whatever direction benefited him the most. He wasn't simply hiding involvement, he was orchestrating it. There were messages where he told the family not to worry about the owner, claiming everything was under control and handled. There were late night calls where he promised he'd soften the mood, as if emotions were tools he could bend at will. He even sent private instructions on how to avoid suspicion, coaching them on timing, tone, and what to say if unexpected questions surfaced. The deeper the digging went, the colder everything felt. This wasn't ignorance on his part. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate betrayal, crafted with patience and covered by layers of practiced affection. Each document exposed another level of deceit, secret agreements, backdoor arrangements, and commitments he had no right to make. Loyalty wasn't something he broke in a single moment. He dismantled it slowly, using trust like currency to buy silence, obedience, and admiration from those who benefited from his lies. What made it worse was the ease with which the family accepted his tactics. They didn't question his motives. They didn't hesitate to lean on him for decisions. They treated him as the unofficial spokesperson of a life he manipulated behind closed doors, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the destruction he was planting in the home he pretended to protect. Every detail exposed not just betrayal, but intention. And intention is the one thing that cannot be forgiven, excused, or rewritten. The truth no longer whispered, it screamed. The first car rolled up the gravel drive before the sun had even settled fully over the vines, its tires grinding like a warning. Then came another, and another. Within minutes, the quiet vineyard transformed into a procession. Shiny SUV, rented limousines, buses carrying people dressed in pastel dresses and pressed suits. Confusion hit hard at first, like a slap of cold water. But confusion didn't last long. Recognition did. These weren't visitors. They were guests, sweating guests, and not a single one of them had been invited by the person who actually owned the land their shoes touched. The number kept growing. By the time the last vehicle squeezed past the gate, the vineyard held 300 strangers walking confidently across private property, as though they had earned the right. Laughter floated across the air, careless and entitled. The sound forced everything hidden beneath the surface to rise. Every lie, every deception, every whispered plan. They all stood in the open now, wrapped in satin dresses and expensive suits. The family moved among the crowd comfortably, directing people toward the ceremony setup they'd arranged without permission. They welcomed guests with bright smiles, pretending everything was perfectly normal, as if the vineyard belonged to them. Their ease revealed exactly how long they'd practiced this deception, how deeply they'd woven themselves into a story built on stolen confidence. Then came the husband, front and center, sleeves rolled up, directing the staff like he owned not just the vineyard, but the truth itself. He shook hands, kissed cheeks, and accepted praise for pulling everything together. Watching him lie so effortlessly in front of hundreds of people made something inside turn to ice. His voice carried across the courtyard with pride, covering each betrayal with charm. Every word he spoke peeled back another layer, exposing a man who had spent far too long performing a role he enjoyed more than the life he claimed to cherish at home. The staff looked uneasy. They kept glancing around, unsure whom to follow. Orders given by the person signing their checks, or orders given by the man insisting he was acting on behalf of the owner. Their hesitation cracked the atmosphere. Whispered concerns spread through the guests like a ripple. People began noticing things: the tension in the air, the missing explanations, the nervous glances. Masks slipped, hidden alliances surfaced. Family members who had been confidently plotting suddenly fumbled their words. Some avoided eye contact altogether, while others doubled down, pretending nothing was wrong even as their expressions betrayed panic. Raw emotions spilled everywhere: guilt in tight smiles, fear in shaking hands, arrogance in forced laughter. And through it all, the husband navigated the chaos with practiced composure, unaware that the performance he believed he controlled was unraveling around him. The moment the crowd realized the truth didn't belong to them, didn't include them, and didn't support the lies they'd been fed, everything shifted, quietly, sharply, and beyond repair. And the stage he built so confidently became the place where his downfall truly began. The husband's charm always came wrapped in an easy smile and a voice smooth enough to calm storms. But the vineyard exposed what charm can't survive: pressure. Real pressure, the kind that cracks the surface of a man who has spent years perfecting the art of pretending. When the weight of 300 uninvited guests, panicked family members, and questioning staff settled onto his shoulders, the performance he relied on for so long began to fracture right in front of everyone. It started small: a stutter in his voice when someone asked who had authorized the event, a tight swallow when a vendor approached, demanding payment for services he had personally confirmed, a flicker of irritation when a family member contradicted his instructions. These were tiny slips, barely noticeable, but enough to show the first signs of a break. Then came the messages. A guest accidentally showed a text thread confirming that the husband had promised the owner wouldn't be a problem. Another revealed screenshots of him arranging a significant side payment for pulling the wedding together. And one vendor, frustrated after being ignored for weeks, displayed a long chain of messages where he negotiated discounted rates by claiming he had full control of the vineyard and its finances. Each revelation spread through the crowd like wildfire. Whisper after whisper formed a storm of suspicion, and suddenly the husband wasn't a charming coordinator. He was the man at the center of a web too tangled to hide. His voice grew sharper. His smile tightened, losing the warmth he used to mask his intentions. The calm demeanor he relied on turned into something frantic, something desperate. Sweat gathered on his forehead as questions came faster than he could answer. Even the family members he once guided with such confidence now stepped back, distancing themselves from a sinking ship they had happily boarded earlier. The pressure dug deeper when a caterer approached, holding printed emails that exposed his promises, private agreements for future access to the vineyard, discounts in exchange for exclusive rights, and even bookings made under his name without consent. Each page cut through the lies he wrapped himself in. He tried laughing it off, brushing it aside, blaming miscommunication, but the cracks were too wide to hide, and beneath the charm, something darker surfaced. A side of him built on manipulation, secrecy, and entitlement. A side that believed deception was a skill, not a flaw. A side that assumed the truth would never reach daylight because he controlled every door it tried to escape through. But daylight came anyway, and it revealed a version of him no one wanted to defend. His voice finally broke, not into an apology, not into remorse, but into uncontrolled frustration when he realized the room no longer belonged to him. The people he had manipulated were no longer following. The lies he crafted were no longer holding. The alliances he built were no longer loyal. And in that moment, when charm fell apart and truth glared back at him from every face around him, one silent realization settled across the vineyard like a final verdict. His secrets had finally caught up. Chaos didn't arrive slowly, it erupted. One argument sparked another until voices clashed across the vineyard, echoing off the vines like warnings no one could ignore. Guests stood frozen, unsure whether to stay quiet or pretend the disaster unfolding around them wasn't real. The carefully arranged celebration crumbled into a whirlwind of accusations, exposed motives, and truths that had been buried so deep no one ever expected them to surface. Family members who once appeared united began tearing into each other, revealing grudges older than the Vines themselves. A sister snapped at an aunt, claiming she'd always felt entitled to things that weren't hers. An uncle shouted back, exposing a decade-old dispute that had been dressed up as politeness during every holiday gathering. Cousins whispered about money owed, promises broken, and alliances formed only when convenient. Every relationship cracked open, spilling raw resentment across tables draped in white linen. And in the center of it all stood the husband, no longer able to pretend he was merely caught in the crossfire. His name ricocheted from person to person, accusations that he'd made secret deals with one side of the family while undermining another. Someone revealed he had promised exclusive rights to vineyard events to a relative no one trusted. Another claimed he'd privately encouraged tension between siblings to gain control of decisions. No one knew the full truth, but everyone had a piece of it, and every piece pointed to him. Forbidden conversations surfaced like ghosts. Late-night phone calls he denied, financial discussions he dismissed as harmless, moments where he'd quietly planted seeds of division, watching families turn against each other while he stood in the shadows pretending to be the mediator. His voice trembled as he tried to explain himself, but explanations don't matter when trust collapses. People weren't listening anymore. They had waited too long for the truth, and now that it was out, they wanted more. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. They wanted to see the man who hid behind charm finally face the consequences of the chaos he had fed with his lies. Guests whispered among themselves, sensing the shift from celebration to scandal. Some tried to leave, only to find the driveway blocked by arguing relatives refusing to let others escape without owning their part in the deception. It felt like a storm with no center, every gust powered by a new betrayal, every explosion fueled by someone else's buried truth. The husband's eyes darted from one furious face to another, realizing too late that the control he treasured was slipping through his fingers faster than he could mend the cracks. He had built an entire life around manipulation, convinced he could orchestrate loyalty, twist emotions, and use love as leverage. But the wildfire he started finally caught up, and everything he'd constructed in secrecy burned in the open. The vines weren't the only thing left scorched. The final confrontation didn't happen in a quiet room or behind closed doors. It happened in the center of the vineyard, right where the altar had been set up, surrounded by toppled chairs, crushed petals, and 300 witnesses who had run out of excuses to pretend they didn't see what was unfolding. The chaos had burned itself down to a tense, expectant silence, the kind that presses against the chest and forces the truth to rise whether anyone is ready for it or not. The husband stood there, surrounded by the same people he had manipulated. Every lie he'd told reflected back at him through the faces he once believed he controlled. His voice tried to recover that familiar charm, but the cracks were too deep, the truth too loud. Someone demanded answers. Another demanded receipts. A vendor held up his phone, displaying messages that proved secret agreements. A family member confronted him about promises made behind closed doors. One accusation after another formed a chain he couldn't escape. He tried to deny everything, but denial is useless when evidence pours in from every direction. Screenshots, emails, voicemails, bank transfers that had no explanation. Every betrayal exposed itself in the open, stripping away the polished version of him he worked so hard to maintain. The crowd shifted from shocked to furious, realizing they weren't just witnessing a scandal. They were witnessing the unraveling of a man who built an entire life on deceit. He claimed he meant well. He claimed he was trying to help. He claimed he had been misunderstood, pushed into corners, forced to make hard choices. But manipulation doesn't sound noble when spoken out loud. It sounds exactly like what it is: control dressed as concern, betrayal disguised as sacrifice. Then came the moment the vineyard staff stepped forward, their voices calm but firm, confirming that the entire event had been set up without permission, that the husband had bypassed every protocol, that he had used the owner's name repeatedly without authority, that he had lied to them too, reassuring them that everything was approved, when nothing had ever been discussed. The family stared at him, realizing they had been pawns in a game he orchestrated. Not partners, not allies, just pieces he moved for his own advantage. The guests murmured in disbelief, watching his confidence collapse into panic. And for the first time, he understood that the room no longer belonged to him. The narrative no longer belonged to him. The lies no longer protected him. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating, final. Then the truth was spoken, clearly, publicly, and without hesitation. Every boundary he had crossed was stated aloud, every deception laid bare, every manipulation acknowledged. It wasn't anger that carried the words, it was clarity, the kind that leaves no room for negotiation, no space for forgiveness, no possibility of rebuilding what he destroyed. 300 people watched the final blow land, not with shouting, not with violence, but with the undeniable weight of truth. And when it hit, it became clear he would never recover from it. No one there would ever dare cross those boundaries again. If this story pulled you in and left your heart racing, don't leave just yet. Hit like if you felt that twist, subscribe to never miss the next betrayal, and turn on notifications so you're the first to witness every shocking reveal. Here, secrets don't fade. They get louder, loyalties break. Truths explode, and revenge, it always finds its mark. Thanks for watching. And trust me, the next story will hit even harder.